Good evening. I think we're going live.
I think we are.
Does it say it?
Nope, you just start talking.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, it's 5 o'clock on Saturday in quarantine, and I want to welcome you back to our third edition of Ask Dr. Kat. So I'm going to turn it over to Kat. She's going to tell you what the show is about.
Yes, this is a very special edition today. We're going to be talking about the needs and the issues that our kids with special needs that are facing during this coronavirus pandemic. We've brought some really special guests here today. Amanda, would you like to introduce them?
You bet. So I first off want to say welcome to everyone. I'm going to start off with Alexis Dixon, who always jumps in. He's from Mediation Solution International and just helps round out the conversation and make it absolutely beautiful. Welcome back. The lovely Dayna Hoff, who has been a friend of mine since year one at Bella Vista Social Club and Cafe. Dayna walked up those steps like most of you do, and the rest is history. We've been working with her foundation for 6+ years. She is the founder and she is the volunteer director of Autism Tree Project Foundation. That's a foundation that is all about early detection and screening and about helping the families that are all affected by autism. You were also like Woman of the Year or Rock Star of the Year, right, Dayna?
A little while ago now. Thank you for that.
That was a big deal. And I'll let Kat introduce her.
Yes. My very good friend and colleague, I'm so excited, Matt Story is joining us. Matt is a civil rights attorney who specializes in special education, really helping countless children and adolescents. Many, we've worked together over the years. I think, Matt, you've been doing this for over a decade. And I bet a lot of kids in San Diego are grateful. A lot of families are grateful for your help with them.
Absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And Matt is your law firm. You're a partner, right? As of the law firm, Do It Right.
Yeah, that's right. So I manage the law firm along with my partner, Seth Schwartz. We started it together around 10 years ago. And our primary focus is special education, and we work all throughout Southern California. And it's pretty broad practice. It can be anything from trying to get a kid's speech and language services to getting them placed in a residential placement in Montana. So it's a real broad spectrum of work, and it's just an absolute blast to go to work every day. Even now, even now quarantined, it's still really good and fun work.
So if we could start, if you don't mind, Matt, I don't want to put you in the hot seat, but when we first met and we invited you to come do a seminar, and you gave a really heartwarming story about how you came about to do the work that you do, and I wonder if you would be willing to share that in this forum.
Sure. So I went to law school and became a special education attorney. I have a brother with cerebral palsy, who I think in a lot of ways in the 80s and 90s and even now is a typical story. You know, my brother was never supposed to walk or talk. And, my parents, I think through sheer force of will, were able to get him to do all those things. And now he's a 6'8", 280-pound guy who has a great job and has just got married actually in November.
Wow! Congratulations!
And so yeah, it was the direct, his experience was the direct reason why I'm here. And I'll say it's the same reason my partner Seth does this. It just comes from that place. There's not a lot of people that practice special education law. It's a real tough area to be involved in. And from what I've noticed is that those attorneys who are doing this.
Oops, I think we lost Matt for a minute there.
He'll come back.
Yes.
This is live television, so these things happen.
Perhaps we could move on to Dayna. Oh, you're back, Matt?
How long did you lose me?
I think we're talking about your partner, the same reason your partner has gotten into this.
Oh, okay. I apologize. If that happens again too, I'll move. But my partner,
He does keep freezing.
Well, we got a Dayna. We have Dayna talk.
I was really enjoying hearing that because like is connected because of his.
there we go. Sorry
Hi,
about that,
Matt.
guys. Hi. So I have weird internet connection. We're still getting used to quarantine. So, but my partner Seth and I met in law school, and we both wanted to do the same thing. And so we came out, and this is what we do. This is what we practice.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. And that's live TV for you, right?
Yeah,
Always
when you were gone, Matt, I was trying to. They were gonna have me pop in. I was saying that I relate to that you started what you're doing because of your brother, and it really touches me deeply. And I value beyond words your heart to be an attorney for special education. My story is that I have my MBA. My husband had his MBA. I really enjoyed sort of being a corporate charger. I worked for Johnson & Johnson and other big companies in sales, and I really did love it. And then our son was not playing like other children at age, for sure, a little bit before 2 years old. So we spent 9 solid months trying to figure out what was going on. And what was completely insane is that I had access to healthcare, and so did my husband. I mean, access like nobody usually does. I was calling at that point in my career on all neurologists in Southern California, and I was selling 2 drugs. One was a seizure drug called Keppra, and the other one was launching a new migraine drug called Frova. And so I was with neurologists all day, and I was even doing preceptorships where I was learning, you know, what was going on with the patients. And so, I mean, I was really hands-on. And what was completely incomprehensible to me was that when I finally got my son diagnosed after 9 solid months of trying to figure it out, I never had heard the word autism in my entire time being in the neurology world, pediatric or adult. My top doctor, Dr. Doris Trauner, in San Diego, who's at Rady's and UCSD, she called it PDD-NOS. And as a rep, and she was one of my top doctors, she had asked me, just because I was very involved with my doctors, she said, hey, would you mind helping me with some of the kids that have PDD-NOS? And I said, sure, what is that? And this is, you know, way before my son. She said, oh, it's pervasive developmental delay and not otherwise specified. So I said, sure. And to be honest, I thought that that meant that children were, at that point, retarded, which is not an appropriate word to use, but that's how my brain honestly translated it. And I was all in to help. She wanted to raise some money, and she had a huge heart for it. So then time was going on, and I was starting to have sort of like a low level Amber Alert as a mother with my son. And it started to just get where it was so bad that I had to go on a leave of absence for work. I just couldn't handle the pressure, and my son was not sleeping, and he had all these things that a checkoff list would have shown, but there was no checkoff list. So after 9 months of finally going to all the places that are supposed to be the best, you know, UCI, UCLA, the local, or, you know, Rady's, it was insane. And finally, Dr. Trauner, who was my doctor I worked with, was like, just bring him in my office for 2 hours. And watching him play, she said, he has PDD-NOS. And I kind of lost my mind. I was just like, obviously, I don't know what it is, because my son was smart. He would just, you know, play very differently, but it was very purposely. Like, he would study, like, every little car in his playroom would be upside down at different angles. He would always be looking at wheels. At the time, there was a Firestone tire crisis in my family's like, oh, Garrett's gonna solve that. You know, everything was making it a positive. But I didn't have any other children, and it was just all consuming. But basically, you know, that's the start of autism. And so at that point, it had almost broke my family, like spiritually, emotionally, financially. And then once we got the diagnosis, we embraced it. but it was hard to, a little bit like breathing and walking was a little bit hard during that time. And everywhere I went was just like, I needed a master's in occupational therapy, and I needed a master's in, you know, ABA, and everywhere you went, you had to be an expert. And I had already just gotten my MBA, which was a lot, you know, when I was working. And so what the number one biggest thing that happened by the time our son was finally diagnosed is I'm so thankful beyond everything else that me and my husband just went, oh my God, what are the next parents going to do? Because it took everything we had, and we were both around healthcare all day, every day. And that hasn't really changed, and it's been 16 years. And I think that my husband and I were like, wow, well, you know, we're going to start this foundation. And I like dedicated myself to that. And I think that we absolutely thought for sure that the numbers would go down, you know. And it was very strange when Garrett was diagnosed way back 16 years ago. It was weird. It'd be like 1 in 500 kids and 1 in 10,000 kids. Like, it made no sense. And neither did the coverage. Like, the stories were bizarre until, you know, later, around when Autism Speak started really heavily doing education at a national level. But it's been a huge blessing. I mean, we have thousands of families that we serve. We have 20 programs, and we are big, like what Amanda was saying, is we've done over 20,000 preschool screenings. So we want to catch a child with a delay. That's the frontline mission, any delay. And then every preschool we work with, children get diagnosed with autism, and that doesn't happen quickly. And at that point, that's when Autism Tree really wants to be like a warm family experience. And anybody that's involved with our foundation, including Amanda, like, I feel like we're family with Bella Vista. Our foundation and Bella Vista are like family. And everyone Amanda introduces us to, we like take into our family. We don't have a lot of attrition. Either people are in it, you know, or they're not. And then when I say not, they're doing other things, and that's totally great. So I personally, without, you know, stroking Amanda, I just feel that my personal being is the most lit up, like my cells and everything, and my belief and my vision. Since the literal day I met Amanda was after our 10-year, 500 person event at Hard Rock, and I met Amanda like the next day, it feels like, and I just felt like everything was possible. Everything that we want to do is possible, and whenever I go to Bella Vista, I 100% feel that way. From the people I meet, from the way that you connect everybody. And Amanda, I just have to say, I'm so grateful. I really am, because you have connected me to amazing people. And I just have a lot of love for you and respect for you. So thank you.
And we
It's
do
very true. Amanda, you brought all of us. I mean, you're the reason why we're all here today, right? To talk about this. I wonder, Dayna and Matt, and Alexis joined in too. One of the questions that arise for me during this time period is, this is challenging for all kids, right? And for kids with special needs, and I think about kids who have IEPs, for example, so individualized education plans. So kids who have ADHD or autism or medical conditions, learning disorders or disabilities, you know, we are very likely, the school's closed for the remainder of the school year, right? And so kids are home for the rest of the school year. And so for those kids who have particular challenges, you know, the school system, I mean, San Diego is a huge provider of interventions for these children. And so one of the thoughts that keep popping up for me that I keep seeing is, how do we help these kids, or what are the challenges that these kids are facing at this time? You know, Matt, if you want to start with that one.
You know, I'd be happy to. I mean, I think right now, since schools closed in March and then we went to spring break, they've opened of recently to start doing a distance learning program. And we don't know what that means. Every school site, every district seems to be doing it differently. Some are phenomenal. A friend of mine had a structured program day one, meaning that her daughter, they use Zoom, some use Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams, and it was a daily structure. Some parents just got an email saying, here are a couple of links, best of luck. And we're seeing that develop now over time, what that's going to be, because in my mind, the reality is we really don't know when school is going to go back into session. The hope is that it's going to be in the fall. But the more you start talking to doctors, the more they're like, that's not going to happen. And so this could be the reality for another year for parents and for children. And so I think
Oh, don't say that.
yeah, I know. I've got two again.
First.
It's really tough. I've got two, and it's been really difficult to get used to that. But for children on an IEP, a lot of them had related services, speech, OT, mental health, ABA, and that was all provided by the school. And so in some sense, the law is the same. The schools are still required to provide related services in academics, but functionally speaking and reasonably speaking, it's going to be significantly different, right? We're not going to have those in-person services anymore. And teachers aren't going to be teaching for 5 to 6 hours a day. It's going to be very limited. And so in my mind, what I tell parents, and my partner came up with this, Seth came up with this, a very good idea. It's to first take an inventory of what you have. What kind of computer do you have? What kind of internet do you have? What kind of printer do you have, right? Because that's the model we're going to be in. And then think of the things, review the IEP and think of the things that you would need in order to effectuate that IEP over time. And once you have that list, email the school immediately and say, this is what I have, this is what I need. And at the same time, set up a meeting with the school so that they can explain to you what services they can and cannot provide. And I think that's the baseline starting point for any parent in general, but specifically parents who have IEPs, because in some school districts, they've told parents, we're just not going to provide services. And they can't do that. And in a lot of school districts, they're sending letters to parents saying, we're going to change the services. And they probably can do that. That's reasonable in light of this circumstance. But nonetheless, I think the first thing that a parent should be doing is setting up a meeting with a school, whether or not it's a formal IEP or an informal meeting. Sooner is better. And try to figure out from the school site what services they're going to be providing and start there.
You know, either Matt or Dayna, one of the things, Dayna, I was looking at some videos on autism, and one of the parents talked about functional denial as an early stage of having recognized that you have a child with autism and all it takes. And I'd never heard that term before, but it sounds quite appropriate. One of the things I was wondering, there are certain families who really manage raising a child with special needs well. What is the profile of families like that? What do they do well? What are some of the things that these families can be examples for other families who struggle with this?
Yeah. You mind saying that first word? What'd you read when you had autism? I thought that was really interesting because it's very on point.
Yeah, functional denial.
100% almost across the board is what we see. No one wants to believe something's wrong with their child. You nailed that. I mean, I like the way I hadn't actually heard it put that way, but I agree with it. To your point, I want to say that in 16 years, I've gotten asked hundreds of times to call somebody. Oh, will you go call my, is somebody, and they'll give me their phone number, and it's somebody that knows me, and I want to do it. And in the early years, I probably did a few times, but I will tell you with complete sincerity, I have had zero, and I mean zero underlined, all bold, success when someone asks me to call whoever's taking care of the child. And I wish that wasn't the case, but it really, honestly, without any exaggeration, I've had zero success. The 100% thing I know is whoever is caring for the child with special needs, they have to be 100% dedicated. And the families that I see succeeding are, they are very in tune to who their child is. They follow their child's interests. They constantly adapt and try new things because nothing ever works. Sometimes it doesn't work, in the short term, or they've been doing it a while and all of a sudden it stops working. We have to stay, really fluid and try new things and realize that like any child development, there's different chapters. You can't keep doing, the same thing. And the other thing is too, not feeling isolated or alone, with autism, there is such an isolation, and I started seeing it more so with girls and their moms because it's not as prevalent. Like the autism rate from the CDC is 1 in every 50 school-age children ages 6 to 17. That's not even including preschoolers, which is our frontline mission, preschool screenings. So that's pretty crazy. And then that doesn't break down the boys versus the girls, which is much more prevalent in boys. So years ago, in 2009, we started a girls program through National Charity League, the Del Sol chapter. We started with 4 girls with autism. We didn't know. Today we have well over 300 in our program. They don't come all at once, but we do monthly programs. And I'm bringing it up because the girls and their moms are so much more isolated. We kind of just had a collective, our foundation and the National Charity League Mothers and Daughters, we just knew like, we really, we need to be more, even more compassionate and even more connected. And that's why they really wanted to do the monthly special programs for the girls. But I guess if I was trying to take it down to 3 things, it would just be really that you are really open to trying new things with your child and absolutely understanding what interests they have. And a lot of times parents will say they don't have any interests. And this is why, if you really looked at the Autism Tree calendar, we did over 280 events last year. People are always like, we have a very small staff and we have 400 volunteers. That's how we do it, that are, you know, constantly helping us, not all at once, but we do a weekly email to 400 volunteers. And at any given time, there could be up to 30 events coming up that we're trying to have help with. And those events are weekend things. On the weekends, we might have 5 things. The Padres give us tickets. The USD athletes are, you know, partnered with the kids. And so it's really, really important for a parent or whoever's taking care of the child to constantly give them new experiences. But having said that, it's really difficult because a lot of times the children have a really hard time doing so. So that's the challenge. But why I think that Autism Tree is still here 16 years later is because we don't typically have kids melting down. I rarely see it when we're out wherever we are as a foundation and we're doing an event somewhere. There's a security, especially because the families start to get to know each other. And I don't just think it's good for the child with autism. I think it's really important for the siblings too, because siblings need to know they're not alone with other siblings because it's so challenging having a special needs child and they get so much attention and they need it. And a lot of times the kids, as they get older, realize that the money that's being spent, the family money, a lot of it is going to the special needs child. And they start feeling very upset and angry because maybe they don't get to do some things they want. So I think that providing opportunities, and the more a family can participate in opportunities together, like a typical family, like going to the Padres game, but I do think it's hard. A lot of it's overwhelming for a lot of families. I know one of my favorite moments with all the different programs we do on the weekend, my son is now in college and doing great. He's in DC at George Washington, but he's home right now with this pandemic. And he came home after a Padre game and he was so excited that Dr. Motri and his wife, that Ivan, had lasted more innings than he ever had. And he was like, Ivan did so good. He was so excited and saw the progress. And that happened from just continually trying to come to the game, get used to the nuances of going to a baseball game and the sounds and the noise. And you know, it's something that's a challenge, but that's what's really important is for families to keep trying new things. And pretty soon, then the child will have an interest.
Matt, is there a role for dads that may be different than moms? I mean, in raising a special need child, or does it require? It certainly requires a partnership and a cohesion within the family. But is there a role that men play or dads play that may be more meaningful than moms? Or can you talk about that, since you were raised in a family that certainly speaks to this issue?
Certainly. I think the majority of, so in my family, I'll speak and then I'll speak broadly. I think my mom was definitely the spearhead. My dad worked and my mom was at home taking care of my brother. And that's probably the most common situation. But I think my dad did and does do an amazing job of being just directly involved. And so, you know, to piggyback off what Dayna said, one of the first things I do when I meet, you know, quite a few families every week is I try to get an idea of how involved they are in this community, because I think that is probably the number one thing to do. And so for us, I grew up in Riverside, and there's no services at that time. There was no supports, there was no advocates, there wasn't a lot. My mom was alone. She didn't have anybody to talk to, or no other kids that were as disabled as my brother, even in the same room. And so I think about that a lot. And so when parents come in to speak with me, that's one of the first things I'll do. And we will spend a significant part of what was supposed to be a legal consultation, giving them directions and emails, and even emailing for them, trying to set up some type of interaction. But whether or not there's a different role, I don't necessarily know. I think the role has to be as involved as possible. And then on the other note, I wanted to mention about trying to diversify the experiences these kids have. So to use my brother as an example, he has really bad tremors, which is pretty normal for cerebral palsy, meaning you shake a lot and certain things become different. And when he was, I'd like to say, I think 32, he started lifting heavy weights. I don't know where it came from. He just did. He was very skinny and he got really big. What was really interesting is he found that by doing so, those tremors he had had since he was, an infant almost went away completely. And
Wow.
so I think it's so important to engage the community, but also engage different activities, because you never know what thing is going to click. And that's typical for any kid, but it's so important for children who have disabilities, because when you find that thing that clicks, it could transform your life.
Yeah.
And in my brother's case, it meant that he could have a meal and he wouldn't have any issues with it. And that's 32 years old. And it's just this long journey that I think a lot of parents have to go through, and a lot of these kids have to go through. But with that patience and understanding to put yourself out there, I think it really ends up paying dividends.
I can't help it. I don't want to over talk you guys. That's not my intention, but I'm so touched by both of the things you said deeply. It's kind of strange, Alexis, because when we started the foundation 16 years ago, primarily I was talking with the mothers and seeing the mothers, and that was by phone. And then once we opened up an office in 2011, and then we'd have meetings where we get together. In the last 3 years, I'm not exactly sure what is happening, but I'm mainly dealing with fathers now.
Interesting.
It's a complete shift. I mean, there's numerous families where I haven't met the mother. There's a divorce. I'm sure Matthew, that the divorce rate's like 90% with children and families with autism.
It's in my family. So yeah, absolutely.
I'm not divorced. No, we got through it. But no, I'm not making light of it. It's like 90%. So what I just wanted to say is that it's really interesting to me. I have numerous families where I haven't met the mother. There's a divorce, and my whole relationship with helping the family is with the father. And I don't really question it. It's just, that's what's happening. And I'm not quite sure why. I feel it's a blessing in that it's been, like life, there's chapters of metamorphosis, and this is the chapter we're in. Some of the women are now at work and the dads are staying at home. But I think one part of it, to answer your question, Alexis, with dads, is if there's a program and dads can be together, like with the USD football and baseball program, fathers love to take their children out there. They can take their child with autism, boy or girl, and the siblings, and everybody plays, and fathers love it. And it also opens them up to see athletes playing with their child. It really opens them up. I think what fathers need is sort of just, if you give them some tools, they are good. What they're not good with and why they leave, I think a lot of times, is because they don't know what to do. And they will not leave a lot of the time. I don't know what the percentage is. If you give them, here's some steps, here's some tools, they're in, and they're all in. And so I want to give a lot of, just gratitude to fathers. And it's not that mothers aren't doing all they can, they are, but I'm just not seeing them like I used to. I'm seeing fathers.
Interesting.
That's a good point, because I was looking at the Miracle League last year, and it was mostly dads. That's a baseball league for special needs kids. There's a few of them. There's basketball, there's hockey even, which is really cool. But
yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, it is mostly all dads, and that makes total sense. It's something that it's a sport they can engage with their kids, and
Yeah.
just having a good time.
It's strength-based for them, right?
Mhm.
I was thinking that Dayna and Matt, one thing that you said, I just want to underscore, is to keep trying. You know, there are a myriad of activities, right? And I know that families, not just with kids with autism, but with ADHD, with other challenges, you know, try to do certain activities and it just doesn't go well. And it can be really disheartening. So I certainly have that experience. I have a child with ADHD, and so we tried different activities, and I don't think we've gotten to where we found that one yet. And I wonder, like, what is it? And of course, you know, I have to acknowledge my own privilege too, is that some of these activities cost money. And I think of all the fees that we've paid, and then, you know, that didn't work out too well. So now we're moving on to the next one and we have to buy new things again. And so I imagine for the families, I don't imagine, I know for the families who don't have as much resources, that it's even more challenging. But one of the things that comes up a lot is that for the families, for the parents, moms and dads, is it's so difficult as a parent to take your child to an activity, right? And you have a lot of hope. It worked for a friend of yours who also has a child with autism or ADHD or other, and it doesn't work out very well. Perhaps there's a tantrum, perhaps the child isn't interested, not engaged, or the family doesn't feel comfortable. And so as a parent, you know, it can feel really frustrating and really disheartening, and I would even say demoralizing. And so the key thing I heard from both of you is support for the parents and for the families. And I know for me as a mom, a working mom, having a support group with other working moms, having a support group with working psychologists, moms, right? Helps me with the challenge, like the personal challenges that I face. It helps me to hear what they're going through. And then I also hear of resources or other things that they're trying that work for them. And then I get to try that out. And sometimes it works. So I just think of, for these families, it's how critical it is that they find that group for them, whatever it is, but they find that support group for them. And Matt, it goes back to, I think San Diego, you know, we have ATPF. We have a number of other, you know, centers, agencies, resources that are available across the income spectrum too, you know, from no cost, because it's donated by foundations like yours, Dayna, all the way up to ones that do charge. And Matt, your story of being in Riverside and not having very many of those, I think that there are many families across rural America, across other nations, where the families are in communities where they don't have those resources. So, you know, what would you recommend for them? I mean, do they go to online, or what do they do?
So that's really, really tough. And I think, so for my experience being younger, and this is not the experience I'm having now in San Diego, it's actually pretty amazing here in San Diego. But being younger, I think that particular child would look more like be a burden on the system. So, you know, my brother played basketball when he was in the middle school, and we had some issues with that because the league didn't want him there. So we had, you know what I mean? And this is, again, this is some time ago. These things don't happen, at least in San Diego, that I see too much anymore. But, you know, when you're dealing with families that are out in Riverside or in Imperial or in more rural America, I think the number one thing and the only thing they probably can do is try to find that online community. And it's what you just said, which is it first of all, it lets you know you're not alone, because that's awful to feel that you're alone and that you're the only one dealing with this. But it also is a great resource to try new things. You know, it's such a nice thing to be able to, you know, say, well, you know, my child's not eating this. Did somebody try this? Or my, you know, he hates, you know, this particular sport. Did anybody find something that worked for that? And so you know, fortunately, we do have the ability to go online and ask these questions. And I think that is the number one thing they can do when they're in areas that aren't as metro as the ones that we live in.
And especially now with the pandemic, I mean, with the quarantine.
Yeah.
I mean, Dayna, for instance, I know you guys have events around the clock for your family. So what is it like now in the midst of a pandemic and a shutdown, a lockdown? How has that changed your programs, and how do you still connect with the families and provide the services that you are providing?
Yeah, I didn't want to lose my train of thought either, Amanda. I just wanted to comment on what Matthew said. I mean, I love having San Diego as my community. I'm grateful to raise my son here, but as running a foundation, I see that there's still a lot going on that makes my head spin. We had a little girl in San Diego that wasn't allowed to go on field trips because they didn't let the special need kids go on those field trips. It was just unimaginable to me. So we get involved in things like that, and we made field trips for the little girl, you know, and we can do that if you look at our calendar. Thank you for bringing that up, Amanda. We have nonstop. So what happened is this: we started getting panicked parents before they shut the schools. And we immediately, one of our board members is a single dad, and he is an attorney, and he had just been in Washington, D.C. And so he had a lot of information and was just like really guiding us. And we started immediately making 1-minute videos for parents to say, we know that you might have, because at that point, things didn't happen all at once. They were shutting daycares, they were sending people home from different types of jobs. And so we knew it. It was like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden we're having this like onslaught of constant parents that are panicking out and not knowing what to do. So we started doing these 1-minute videos, and the early ones were about, let's create a schedule with your child and let's be flexible and let's do the schedule together and just make it really easy and visual how to do it. And then we started, you know, having a lot of people in our community that like you guys could all if you wanted. We love what's happened with our videos. It's been 1 month, and we have had over 117,000 people now looking at over 50 videos that are available on our YouTube. These are quick videos largely. And we actually started having people read to the kids, and sometimes kids are reading to the kids. So it's just like when you're having a nutty day, you can just boom. And the other important thing is that I see that our foundation is going to grow into a much, much bigger global community or national community. I'm saying global because we have people from other countries now looking at the videos. But what we did is we analyzed the 20 programs we provided for free. And we, in the first month, did 13 virtual programs that kids of different ages can tap into. We have 8 more on our calendar coming up this month. We will continue to do that even after things start slowly going back to normal, because now we're building a community on some of the calls. Last call I did, we had a guy with autism that's really involved in our foundation and came to Amanda's for the neuroscience conference that we do at Bella Vista and the consortium. He's from Massachusetts and he has family here in, I think, Orange County. And then we had one of our volunteers who you might remember, Amanda. She was always around, Heidi, for years. She's one of our hardest workers. She's now in Wisconsin. And so all of a sudden, you know, she can be at things. Yeah. So it's really, I'm not a really techie person. And so I just didn't know what to think of it all. And after our first lunch and learn that our chairman of the board came up with, he's like, why don't you start doing a lunch and learn? Because I would tell him everything that's going on. We did our first one last week. There was 26 people. And what really blew my mind is the heart connections that came out of a Zoom meeting. I just didn't see that coming. And then I also, Amanda was telling before you arrived, I watched the one that you did, your first one with Kat and Alexis. And that's what I told them I felt like I felt that connection and I felt like everyone was being really authentic. And I was just really amazed that we can do that virtually on Zoom. I didn't, expect that. So in the middle of a global pandemic in 16 years, I really want to say with complete reverence that I cannot believe where we're going and the volume that we're serving, because we serve thousands of families, but all of a sudden we are having schools, agencies, other countries using our videos. So we're doing a couple a day at least. So I think, it's really inspiring to see that during a really difficult time, we can still, like you're doing, Amanda, bring this connection and actually authentically get to know each other on a different medium.
Absolutely.
One of the things that Matt talked about was weightlifting. As you were speaking, I was thinking of two things. One is the autism community as integrative and as collaborative as it should be, so that it is a greater resource of support for families? But primary, what I'd like to ask is nutrition for the kids, autistic kids, during this time. Food is medicine. So what should kids be eating, and what should parents be considering, because the kids can't go outside, so they're not as active. And so nutritionally speaking, what does that look like? And then my second question is the collaborative aspect of the autism community.
I think, Dana, you'd probably be better at answering that than I am.
Yeah, I just don't want to take space all the time, you guys. I really value each of you. So do you have anything you want to say, Dr. Kat, on that, or do you want me to take it?
Oh, oh
Um,
no, please.
Okay. Well, to answer your question, Alexis, it's a really good point, and it makes me want to have Carolyn Cates, who runs our farming and nutrition program and has gotten grants from Kaiser to do so. We've been really dedicated, have worked with multiple farms, done it multiple different ways of learning to keep what the children need, how to keep helping and moving and trying. We've tried it many different ways, and we keep evolving it. And it's a really important subject that you brought up, and that's why we keep trying to learn and grow and learn and grow. And so I think what I want to say is I would love it, Amanda, if we brought Carolyn Cates on, and the other person that would be really beautiful to bring on could be Pablo. He's a board member, and he is very passionate about food, but on the connection and family and sort of nurturing that food brings when you bring it together as a community and the table. So from the Autism Tree standpoint, those are the two people I'm personally involved with. And then at a greater level, your question about the autism, there's more groups in San Diego alone doing autism than I know. I don't know them all. I think that the problem is so big with the autism spectrum. I'm not sure what your opinion will be, Matthew, but it's so big that it just takes multiple agencies, and it's not that easy to collaborate because there's so many different philosophies. I hate to compare it to religion, but I mean, there's this intensity that you've probably seen between homeschooling and not homeschooling, and that's very much in place with with autism. And so if you want my authentic thing is, like, for example, myself, like, I thought that my son was triggered by the vaccines because he didn't have, I had video of him, and yet I'm not going to sit here and bang and become an anti-vaccine. I'm not an anti-vaccine person, but I'm just being really authentic with you. I thought I was in a class action lawsuit with my son related when he was little, because I absolutely thought I had so much video of what he used to be able to do, and then all these vaccines he couldn't do it anymore. And it was by date and the MMR and this and that, the actual lot numbers, and then I just had to let it go and just focus on, like, okay, this happened, and I didn't choose that. But the reason I'm bringing it up is it's really, really complicated on complicated on complicated. And you have to choose your time. There's only so much time, and I absolutely chose my time, and I still am, to create a brighter future for each child. It just started with mine, and then the next one, and the next one, and that has not changed. And that's what I'm focused on right now. What Amanda, it was so great question, is like, what I'm focused on right now isn't so much the COVID-19 virus. I'm focused on what do we do, shelter in place, to keep creating brighter futures for each child. That's the everyday focus, but nutrition is certainly important. And if Amanda wanted, if you're going to do another one and Alexis is here, we could bring one of those people on, Amanda.
That'd be great. Yeah, we're also bringing someone on from Brazil who's a doctor.
Yeah,
To talk about food being medicine. Yeah, so very important.
I love that idea.
I mean, even kids that aren't special needs. I mean, my kid went up to school, upstairs, and I saw him walk by as I was filming a segment with a carton of ice cream. Working the system right now. They are working the system.
Everybody is.
Speaking of
we're all at home. We have more time to eat. Go to the fridge.
Yes. And actually, that's good. So speaking of ice cream, Alexis, to your point of nutrition and the role of nutrition or food for kids with special needs, for some of the kids that I know who have ADHD and where medication is extraordinarily helpful for them, especially for attending like to academic lessons. Now that they're home, they're able, just the demands are less, with the distance learning, and it's also more flexible. They can, go for a jump in the trampoline for 20 minutes before they go in and work on a project or work on an assignment, and then they can go have a meal before they come back. And so what I'm hearing is that for some of the families, they don't need to take as much, the child doesn't need to take as much of the medication. And how that plays into the role of food is that some of the stimulants, one of the side effects is that it lowers the appetite for the child. And so for some of the kiddos, they're able to eat more at this time. So if anything, they're kind of becoming more, becoming healthier in terms of food. But Dayna, I just want to go back to the point of Alexis' question of collaborations. And you're right, there are so many, especially with the internet and the World Wide Web, right?
There's hundreds.
There's so many, probably thousands. And, and what
it's actually true. Sorry, you're right. I'm wrong.
There's so many. And
I know. There's like 16,000 foundations and somewhere between 12 and 16,000 foundations. So it's very possible.
And not just foundations, but there are different approaches, as you mentioned, and some of them are directly opposed to each other. And how do you choose as a new family, right? And so I always go back to, because I have families asking me this when they come in, some part of my work is the actual diagnosis part. We use the gold standard evidence-based assessment, which is using the ADOS, the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, along with interviews, developmental histories, medical histories, and other information. And then we develop a treatment plan. And so what we always go back to is what is the evidence-based approaches? What does science tell us is most helpful? And of course, for individual families, it may vary somewhat, right? And that's why we have individualized plans. But for the most part, if we're trying to make a decision and we need to kind of just, okay, there's options 1, 2, 3, which one do we choose? I always find that it's so helpful, and I do my parents' best because I get to see them for years down the line as they progress in their treatment, in the interventions, is to choose what is science-based, what it tells us. And of course, with science, it's iterative, so it can change. It doesn't mean that what they said 10 years ago stays the same. It just means that science builds on itself. The more we have studies, the more we can learn what is helpful. And the role of food, for example, 10 years ago, we may know less than what we know now. Does it mean that science is wrong? No, it just means that 10 years ago, we didn't know what we know now. And we always try to go by the latest research. So I always kind of find that helpful.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you're at Rady Children's Hospital, right, Dr. Kat?
Yeah, I'm at UCSD
and Rady's. Okay. Yeah. And that's, we started our foundation with the support of UCSD and our doctors are at Dr. Levy and Dr. Chandra, who helped us start our UCSD and Rady's. And, my husband and I came from a healthcare background, so I'm very respectful and want to be aligned with the medical community. But having struggled the early years with my son, if he hadn't progressed, there is 100% like nothing I wouldn't have tried. There's not even one thing I wouldn't have tried. Like if we weren't moving forward, I would say without hesitation, I would be open to anything, anywhere in the world. I mean, I would, and so I'm really just wanting to be honest that with a parent, if they're trying everything and it's not working, then I'm an open heart to, okay, I have one instance where when one of the people on our team had 2 kids with autism, and her son was my son's same age at that time, 10 years old. And her son was tantruming all the time, and the neighbors were calling CPS. And it just got to the point where they were going to take him out of the home. And we supported her to do something completely what would be considered extremely outside of the medical efficacy or whatever. She went to another country and did like stem cell or stem cord. It was something completely cutting edge. And honestly, I'm glad she did it because he still got to stay at home. It doesn't cure something. It just got them through that moment. And you wouldn't hear me telling another parent to go do what she did. I'm just glad we supported her like wholeheartedly. Like, we know she's a smart parent. What drove her to do it is she just wanted to have her son not get taken away from her. So these are realities. These are realities, and our
Right, that
nonverbal.
a lot of families do. A lot of families, when they are faced with big struggles, right, and big challenges, would do whatever it takes to help their children.
And then I know all of us know that what is so heartbreaking and unthinkable is that our families are targeted, and they're charged 3 times more for summer camp and every other imaginable thing. And that's why when we did Autism Tree, we put all of our own furniture in it in the office and just said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to charge the family. You're safe. There's no hidden agenda. Like, just, we want to treat you with love and just listen to you and help you navigate and get your child, let's move every day. Let's make a little progress. And we don't charge families. So
that's a great point in terms of the cost, because when you have a child with special needs, there's so much cost that comes into play. And Matt, I know that's an area that you and I have worked a lot on over the years, right? I work with mostly families of low income. They cannot afford extra special camps or other resources, and so and interventions. And so, Matt, one of the things that you've helped with, and you don't charge families either, right?
No, not at all.
wow, Matt, we need
No.
to connect.
No, I mean, we would, and Seth and I, when we started, the idea behind what we were doing is, if you're a parent and you think what the school is doing is wrong, right, and you decide you want to try to change that, you're going up against a massive law firm, and you're by yourself, and unlimited budgets and things like that. So the idea was to give parents the same footing as the school district has, and that means we're not charging parents for that service. Because to do so would preclude the majority of the population. And so we're able to do that. But again, it's why not a lot of people practice this area. And I'll say 2 things on what you said, Dayna. We still do get cases now and then where a parent shows up and says, my daughter was supposed to go to 6th grade camp and they just told her she can't. I usually, when that has happened over the last few years, it's a phone call. We just call the person in the district, usually the special ed director or somebody below them, and say, hey, guess what this staff did? And it usually is remedied at that point, which is a good thing. But you're right, it still happens. And a lot of parents think that that's okay, that what they've just been told by the staff is a normal, legal, totally acceptable thing. And that because of that, their kids aren't going to get to participate in a lot of activities that should otherwise have been free because they're provided by the state.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, the other thing that you said too, when you were talking about kind of trying new things, you said the exact right thing, which is I would wait to see if there's progress. And if there's not progress, I'd probably move on. And I think that is the exact mantra everybody should have. It's just trying something out, being open to that new experience and saying, okay, did this work for my child? We do have issues. I think probably everybody runs into this where I think there are certain things that are injected into the community that seem like snake oil. I think the special needs community can be really,
Absolutely.
it's an easy target, to be frank. It is an easy target. And, I have an office, there's 7 attorneys, and it is not uncommon once a week or a few times a week to just hear people screaming, with anger because somebody was doing something. Wow. But again, I think to take a step back, if that parent is, diligently trying new things, but looking to progress, then it's probably okay.
Mm-hmm. I think, I totally agree with you. And Kat, when you were talking about this earlier, and I lost my train of thought about it. You were talking about something earlier and it played off what Matt's talking about, but it's just the thing of like, the positive about being a community is you're not alone. Then the challenge might be that you have unrealistic expectations of your child, and you're like, well, you covered it earlier, Dr. Kat, of like, oh, this person had a great experience, and then you feel terrible as a parent, and you're disappointed in your child. And I just really hope that that's happening less in Autism Tree, because we have so many families where the child, after 16 years, they've grown up there. We have a lot of kids and they've all made amazing progress, like going to college, but all on their own. Their own journeys are all different, even more different than a typical child. And I think the biggest important thing that helps is the more a parent keeps really understanding the child's interests. Even when they don't understand, they're out there and they're letting it experience new things. And then they really, that will mitigate a little of just like the hit and miss, like, oh, I'm going to do this when the child's not really interested. And then what adds a little tiny bit to the complication is this. We have all these wonderful programs with sports, like the Padres are so generous, USD football and baseball program since, over 10 years. And every parent would practically say this, oh no, my kids don't like sports. My kids don't play sports. So we have to overcome, no, it's okay. It's not about the sports. It's about the relationship with the athletes and playing with your kids. And parents just, that is a hard thing for them. And it's interesting. I guess, it logically makes sense, but we're like, no, it doesn't matter. It's not about that. And then some of the fathers actually do have trouble. So the child will come out, they're not going to play baseball, and they're going to kick the baseball around the field like soccer. And the athletes don't care, and the coach doesn't care. Yeah. And it really, those kind of paradigm shifts are very good for fathers to see, because by the time, from the start time to the finish time of one experience watching athletes with kids. And that's one thing, one of our power moms who's like been a mentor to me, who Amanda knows, Sandy Anderson, she has 2 sons on the autism spectrum, and I really look up to her, and she's always trying new things and following Joel's interests. And she said to me, she was like she's always been the mother of our football players for over 10 years. And she just says, it's incredible how the football players, they're such big, in there playing football, they follow the child so easily, so naturally, and they have, unlimited energy. So it's a really good program. And in that, I think that it's a good example that parents also have to be more open, more fluid, and get their child out there. The worst thing we can do, and right now we're being forced to do, is stay at home. Well, we have to get out of the house, and we have to, I think with families with special needs kids, they need to run in a bigger group as families, because it's also good for, how do you feel about that, Matt, being a sibling? Do you feel like that? I would say from the Autism Tree standpoint, I feel the siblings really get a lot out of going to family events with the foundation. But I wonder how you feel. I only have one child, so Garrett doesn't have a sibling. How would you feel about that?
Well, there's 6 of us now, and so I think it's necessary for a lot of different reasons. I would say that I think my older sister, and myself have higher expectations for maybe my brother at times. And so we'll have a discussion with my parents about maybe some event, and maybe my parents are like, well, that's okay. But my sister and I are like, absolutely not. No, we're not treating him any different as you would treat us. But I think having the siblings involved in that community gives them perspective on what else is going on, and sets expectations for them, but also makes them more comfortable. I think for a sibling, for me, my brother, I really never knew he was disabled, I guess is the right way to say that. But I think, at the same time, I never really had opportunities as a young person to see other kids who had any issues. It was, my brother was always around us, or something that my parents would put on, but it was typical children. There were no other children that had a disability. And so my experience has been, when I've gone to see these sibling groups or siblings involved in these groups, it just seems so fantastic. It's just so nice to see them involved and have an understanding. And, in a lot of ways, it seems to probably give them a drive to keep working in this community, which we need a lot more of. I really think that. I'd love to see more siblings, especially, working in this community.
Matt, it seems like, oh, sorry, Alexis,
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. It seems to me that it's not so much the activity. Dayna, you're absolutely right. Like, it's not so much the activity that is important here, but it's the relationships that are happening during these, whether it's between the siblings, between the baseball player, who's a role model, and also between parent and child too. Right. And I just wanted to, I know we just have a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to, with permission from the parent and the child, describe something that happened this morning, or something she posted this morning that happened yesterday. So it says, you're really good at what you do, and I appreciate all your hard work, but this format isn't working for me, and I have some ideas about how to make it better. Is it okay if I share them? And that's my 11-year-old, so this is the parent, autistic son with ADHD and emotional disturbance in a Zoom session with his teacher, paraprofessionals, special ed teacher, and counselor that was convened at his request to discuss modifying his online assignments. This is the child who was mostly nonverbal between 3 and 4, whose kindergarten teacher thought he might have to repeat the year because he couldn't read, until he was found to have a 3rd grade reading comprehension level only weeks later by a special ed evaluator. The kid who cursed out his 4th grade teacher and banged his head against the wall when he found someone sitting in his chair. The kid who struggles with bouts of depression and anxiety, chews his shirt incessantly, and gets unpredictably overwhelmed. This is the mom. I am so proud of him. He dictated a script for me to scribe for him ahead of time and successfully negotiated for submitting his assignments in an alternate format. And he allowed me to sit in the corner, but he managed the meeting himself. And I just think that's why we do everything we do here, right? In each of our different roles here, Dayna from the foundation, providing all these resources, Matt for championing, our children's educational needs, Amanda bringing us all together, and Alexis bringing the humanness to this. This is why we do what we do. I just wanted to share.
Yeah, we're all united in creating brighter futures for each child.
Yeah.
Each person, Amanda, each person.
That's right. And Amanda, I think we're out of time, but would you like to talk about the upcoming episodes that we have?
Yeah, first I want to give a shout out to my family up north, a shameless shout out, because they've lived it. They've lived it. I went through the whole experience, learning what is an IEP. I mean, I don't know. I was in Madrid and came back, and talk about a strong family. It's just, I'm not going to get teary-eyed. So going on to the next, what do we have coming up? Monday we've got a segment, Great Minds in Quarantine. That's going to be 2 amazing women producers, one who's in South Africa, Natalie Austin, and Emily Dumais, who is currently, I think, in lockdown in LA, who's with the Travel Channel. They're going to be talking about their experiences becoming female producers, and also what it's like in their industry in quarantine. We're going to have the former San Diego mayor, police chief, and current CEO and president of the Chamber of Commerce, Jerry Sanders, the chief. He'll be coming on. And I know Alexis has Genjo Roshi. We had a few technical difficulties last week, so he's so gracious, and him and Steve Garber will be coming back. Lots of amazing shows going on. Lauren Avenius is starting one around community builders called Visions. So very excited, have been talking to friends down south of the border, and it's just awesome, like you're saying, to finally take a vision that was with the community and just grow it globally. So you're along for the ride, Miracle Coast, no boundaries, here we go. And thank you
so much to each of you for coming. Dayna Hoff from Autism Tree Project Foundation, Matt Story, Schwartz and Story.
Thank you.
And Alexis, thank you so much.
I really enjoyed this time with all of you. I hope we stay connected. It's great. Thank you, Amanda, too.
Matt, thanks for everything you're doing. Dayna,
it was a pleasure to meet you guys. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Kat.
Thank you.